once again. Thank you all for joining us. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala, and we'll be speaking of the High Court in New York finding the no excuse absentee voting law to be constitutional. Of course, I'm joined, as always, by Jay Carter, also known as Timid, the hip hop artist and chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Oh, same old, same old. Really nothing significant in the past week, at least on this front over here.
Well, it's
So,
kind of like no news is good news, I guess.
I suppose, well, you know what? Actually, that's not completely true. Um, our podcast last week when we were talking about the Olympics and ray gun and that controversy, I got an email from a university professor who listened to it and is going to use what we were talking about as part of a discussion for the class. So I think that's really dope.
Oh, wow. That's pretty dope.
Yeah.
They specify what exactly they would be talking about and what they found interesting about it.
It was in general. They said they liked our take on it, and so they're going to be talking about. I guess they're trying to figure out how to get the class in on the interaction, but I guess it's more along the lines of appropriation and maybe respect of the culture type of thing. So that type of the issue, and I may be addressing the class at some point as well.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty dope. It's
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
to hear that kind of feedback as well.
Yeah. So nuance makes it to academia.
You know what I'm saying? That's what's up.
I'm gonna update the resume. Speaking of updating the resume, I am releasing my single on Friday. I know I've been talking about it, and so it does come out this Friday. Bring Raucous Back, featuring Cool G Rap. And I've been busy on the promo front, right? A lot of people may not understand or appreciate all that goes into trying to promote music, right? In fact, I had a conversation with someone a few years ago, and I was very busy at the time with not only my law practice, but with politics, right? And they were saying, why don't you put out some new music now? And I said, well, listen, I work on music whenever I can, but I just didn't think at the time I had the capacity to promote it, given all that went into it. I said, I would, if I'm going to spend time working on some new music and putting it out, I want to make sure that it has every opportunity to be heard by as many people as possible, right? So I don't want to just put it out after spending a year working on it and then just falls into the void as if it was never released. So,
Right.
right, promo plays a big role in that, obviously, and the person didn't appreciate that. They were like, I don't understand. I think it was around COVID time also. They're like, well, you can't really do shows now. So what is there? Like, you're just putting it out online. What's the big deal? Maybe it was a selfish ask of the person because they wanted to hear the music or something, but they didn't seem to get that so much work and so many hours are spent on promo, right? And if I'm,
Right.
for example, running a political campaign, I don't have the time to spend hours every day trying to promote the music. But people don't see that, right? People don't see what you're working on behind the scenes. They just see what you post online.
Right. Right. Yeah. And there's because there's a lot that goes into it. And they don't see what goes into even just making the music itself, much less the second or third part where you're doing the promotion and trying to figure different ways to actually get people to hear the music.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's just like here, just give it to us. I remember um I released a single and I was doing the promotion on some social media and this and that, and I was getting feedback. And I remember one particular comment was like, "Oh, this is dope. When's the next one?" Like this is the release for this one, and you're already asking about the next one.
Right.
Let's marinate. Listen to this a little bit. Like,
Right, right. That's the world that we live in now, no. And you will see people say that, you got to be consistent, put out a release every few weeks or every week or whatever, which is kind of crazy. I do want to push back against that notion a little bit, though I understand that that's the world we live in to a certain extent. So you got to find the right
right,
balance, I suppose. But yeah, that is an idea that you see expressed often, not just with music, but I was watching an interview with the makers of Breaking Bad. And I think they said it was 120 hours, something like that, altogether. So people now will binge watch the whole series. And
Mhm.
basically, their reaction will be like, I just finished watching the 120 hours of Breaking Bad. I liked it. When's the next 120 hours coming out? It's like not appreciating all that goes into trying to put together 120 hours of a TV show.
Right, right, right. It's yeah. I don't know. It's crazy, but I mean, it's it like you said, it's kind of where we're at right
Yeah.
now.
So, is it a losing battle, or should you try to make music or art in general that has replay value, right? Because the premise, at least academically, right, theoretically, is if people are listening to it or consuming it over and over again, they won't be as demanding for the new stuff, right? Because it isn't just like a one and done type deal. You don't just listen to it or watch it or whatever and throw it out. You actually take your time with it. Is that a losing battle? I mean, is it just that the world that we live in now won't even allow for that? Or is it possible to make art that is really great that people will want to consume and enjoy multiple times before demanding something new?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the question is a mix of your what's your goal? Like are you putting out music for your artistic expression, for your interests? Or are you trying to attain that wide pop appeal type of thing?
Well,
And I
how
think
about this? Again, I was going to say just building a fan base, let's say.
yeah, just building a fan base. I mean, I think there's probably a mix there. You want to put out what you want, what you put out, and the idea is that people that like what that type of vibe are going to be drawn to that. Instead of like, you're casting a wide net and then you go with whoever comes to you.
Mhm.
You want to do what it is that you're comfortable doing, right, over the long term. That
So,
may you may suffer on how big you're going to get,
right.
but
So it kind of sounds like you're suggesting that you're trying to find your audience. And so if you're going to take that approach of, I'm not going to release a song every week or every 2 weeks, I'm going to put something out and let it marinate. You're trying to find an audience that will appreciate that kind of strategy as opposed to the audience who's going to want something new every week.
well, I think in that meantime, if you're not putting out like, some like you said, some people say put out every week, but if you're putting out one song every, I don't know, once a year or every couple months, whatever it is that you're doing, you still have to do some sort of activity in the
For sure.
meantime
Right.
to
Right.
make sure that release has legs. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you
Absolutely.
can't just drop it and let it go. Like there
Right.
has to be something. Maybe you're building content off of it. Maybe you're doing shows. Maybe you're doing appearances, interviews, whatever it is that you're doing to keep pushing that
Yeah.
in the meantime.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. And the beautiful thing is, I think we talked about this last week, but now the way that social media works, just because a song is old or has been out even for a month or 2 months or any number of months or any period of time at all, it's still discoverable to a lot of new people
Yeah,
all the time, right? So you can have a song that's been out for a while, but keep creating content around that song. And okay, maybe you're a fan base who's like, yeah, we heard this already, but at the same time, you're able to expand the fan base by bringing new people in who haven't even heard it before, right? And at
absolutely.
that point, you're probably trying to do a little bit of both. You're trying to grow the fan base, get exposed to new people while delivering content for your people, right, who are already paying attention to you to keep them on board, keep them paying attention.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. An example of recently, I released a video on the Instagram Reels where I'm doing an acapella,
Yeah,
but it's an acapella from a song that was on an old album. But
right.
you've heard it before. I've heard it before, performed it before, but a lot of people haven't because
I
it was
performed it with you before it was even on the album. Yeah,
yeah, right.
and I think I'm on background vocals on that song on the album too.
I think you are
Yeah,
on
yeah.
you are on background
I'm doing
vocals.
the mores in the back. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But that actually addresses what you're saying. Like, what might be old to us could be new to someone else, and it could be done in a different take. You know what
right.
I mean? Like this was an acapella versus on that beat that was there. I could do it on a new beat. I could do a remix beat. You can do um tiny desk concert type of
Yeah,
performances or acapellas or all
right.
different types of ways of
Right,
doing it.
right, right. And you can batch create content too. I know this might be getting a little technical now, but I think it's interesting. Like I draw the analogy to something like game show. Like you watch Family Feud, you see Steve Harvey hosting it, right? Every single night you see a different episode, and like, how does he have time to host a show every single night? Same with Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, or any of these shows, right? They've got lives outside of that. Steve Harvey is hosting a regular show in the morning and acting, stand up comedy. How's he getting to the studio to do Family Feud every night? But that's not how it is. You batch record it. They might record a whole month's worth of episodes over the span of 2 days or something like that, right? And then you
Right.
put
Or
it
they
out,
might do the
put it
whole
out
season
right at
in
once.
like a 2 month block or something, and
Yeah.
then yeah.
Yeah. I know Jeopardy does several episodes a day when they record it. They don't
Yeah,
record.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm taking a similar approach. I mean, I think it's smart, right? Unless you're really going to
Yeah.
find time to record a new video of yourself for TikTok every day or something like that. It's smart to batch record the content and then put it out slowly over time.
Yeah, and then yeah, I think in that way you also have less chance of burning yourself out with content. Because then if you're trying to keep up every day with content, that means every day you're thinking, I got to do something new, I got to do something. It becomes more of a chore. If you do it all, you do 10 of them in the same day, then you kind of got that weight off your shoulders, you
Yeah.
know? You've got a lot of time to maybe think of some other stuff or wait until you have to do more.
Right. Right. And so I think you're saying pretty much that there is a balance to be found, right? Getting back to that original question about quality
Yeah.
versus quantity, you can focus more on the quality as long as you're still giving people enough quantity. But that enough quantity doesn't have to mean a whole new song or a whole new album every month or something like that. But it just means that you're giving them something, some kind of content, right, to kind of keep it relevant, right? Keep yourself in front of people. And like you said, it could be variations of the same song. It could be you performing it in a different location, whatever it is. Maybe some behind the scenes stuff, right? But you're kind of feeding the fan base, but you're also not giving in to the fast food lifestyle. I think that was one of your lines, right? Wasn't it something about fast food and forgettable lifestyle or something like that?
Right, right, right. What was
Yeah,
that on?
that was
That
on
was off.
Time for the Jibber Jabber. Still trying to be hood in the penthouse. Stop that right now.
Right, that was the title track.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
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 Fast food, forgettable music and lifestyle, right? Is what you said, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
That's
So
another verse I could do a cappella,
yeah,
I
you can
think.
do everything a cappella, right? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we were talking about this on the show last week. I know. I think we had a conversation about like all the music that you don't put out. We at some point we mentioned this.
Right.
Just because you're not going to put it out doesn't mean that it's all garbage. I mean, of course,
Right.
number one, you went through the iteration of doing it, you exercise that muscle creatively,
Mhm.
but more than that, that could be sources for acapellas, for social media
Absolutely.
exclusives, for anything, right? It's still
Absolutely.
work that's probably good, unless you just think it's garbage and you're embarrassed by it or something like that. But there's probably something in there. Maybe it just is a matter of redoing it or fixing it, getting it to a different standard, whatever it is. But it's still
Mhm.
work that you could draw from, source material that you could use for something.
Absolutely. And then when you're doing it, if you're doing it as visual content, then you can play with the different types of visuals, how you're going to deliver it, how what the atmosphere you're setting in the imagery, and then that becomes a different aspect to it as well.
Right, right. Yeah. And like we said, there are so many different ways you can put out content. You can do acapellas, live
Yeah.
performances, skits. Even you see people get really creative on TikTok and these platforms. So there's a lot that you can
Yeah.
do. So
And speaking of skits,
yeah,
before we go into the other stuff, it was you put up the skit recently that we did in the middle of God, what was the
Inferno.
song? Inferno, and
Yeah,
we purposely did the skit like the scene from 8 Mile, and you put both of them back to back or
right.
next to each other, and I didn't realize how well they synced up. Like even the pacing seemed to be very similar.
Oh, I
Or
did
was
use
that your editing magic?
yeah, I did use a little bit of studio trickery. Not a whole lot though, right? You're right. It did match up pretty well, but I wanted it so that even the cameras would change at the same time, right? So it looked like it was a one-to-one match, and so I would have to do things like freeze frames. I'm going into some tricks now, right? I would freeze frame the 8 Mile scene
Mm,
for just a few frames extra, and basically just copy that one frame as like a still image, copy and
got
paste it like 8 to 10 times, however many times I needed, so that the cameras switched at the same time.
got you, got you, got
Yeah,
you. Okay, okay. Because I was like, wait a minute, that the pacing even seems like
yeah,
it's like I don't remember editing it in that way.
right. Yeah, and that was kind of one of the reasons why I put that together because I wanted to see how close it was, and it was pretty close, right? But I made it even closer. So,
True, true, true.
um, yeah. So getting back to bring Raucous back, the single I'm dropping on Friday. What I was going to mention is I spent many an hour yesterday sending this out to blogs and websites, which I know aren't really in favor as much anymore. They used to call it the blog era. A lot of artists got discovered on blogs. Now, probably more TikTok and Spotify and maybe YouTube or whatever. Blogs aren't as big, but they still have some big sites. OK Player, for example, still up there. Hip Hop DX. I mean, you have plenty of sites. I actually went to Chat GPT and was like, "Give me a list of 100 hip hop blogs that are still running." Right, and I went and hit them all up. Now, by the time I got to like 53 or 54 on the list, some of those weren't actually blogs. I think some of them were just straight up made up. Some of them were like, Spotify hip hop. Oh, that's not a blog. That's a genre on Spotify. You know what I mean? Some of it was like basically cheating on the test, right? To try to get to the 100. But it did have quite a few good ones in there, and so I did. And ones I never heard of, by the way, right? So I went and checked them out and tried to find the contact. Not all of them have easy to find email addresses anymore. It used to be contact us, email us at this account, or click here and you fill out the form. It seems like a lot of them are now trying to hide their contact information, and it was a bit of a challenge to find all of it. Some of it you had to actually click on their Facebook link, go to the Facebook About section, and sometimes you would find an email in the About section. So there's a tip for anyone out there trying to find a company or an organization or website's email address. Sometimes it's hidden in the About section on their Facebook page. I found several that way. But
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes there were other methods I had to try to find, or sometimes I couldn't find anything. I just said, screw it, and sent them a message on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. But I got some responses back. I'm going to be added to a playlist apparently on Spotify and a blog. I think they're going to do a blog review from this one site that I hit up. So hopefully they say nice things about it in their review. I think it's called Folded Waffles. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I didn't hear about it either, but it was one of the ones that ChatGPT found, and so I looked at it. And I'm like, okay, they post hip hop music and they got that thing going, so they're apparently into it, and so it's gonna be on there. One of them hit me back and wanted money, which kind of pissed me off because at first they acted like they were just so into it. They were like, "This is great, awesome, man! I can put you on
Mhm.
this page here, and I can put you on a hot new artist page, and I can put you on this." And I'm like, "Okay, great, thank you, that's awesome." And then he sends me an actual PayPal request email.
Yep.
It's like, just sent over the payment info, man. I was looking forward. I'm like, what? I never mentioned anything about paying for this. This isn't some pay to play stuff. I sent you a press release and a song,
Mhm.
an exclusive drop of the song before it comes out, and you're telling me you're going to feature it. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. And now you're asking for money. Now you're bringing up money. That's crazy. That's not a way to do business.
Yeah, there's a lot of pay to play out there. It's gotten a lot more common. Um, and that wasn't the case, especially in the so-called the blog era.
Right.
Um, it's not just what you do.
No, no, I would never do that. And besides, it's just not the way to conduct business. I mean, if you're going to do that, if that's going to be your business model, be upfront about it. And maybe you'll find people willing to
Right,
enter that business transaction with you. But
right.
don't hold yourself out as a website that's going to feature music and you have a submission link or you have contact information, whatever it is. Because some of these sites will be like, submit music here. You do that, and then they never tell you ahead of time that they're really trying to sell you a spot. They try to trick you, and they send you an email saying that your music is great and they want to feature you, and still not bringing up money. It's like they're trying to get you psyched up about the fact that you're going to be on their website to the point where you almost feel like you have to pay because you don't want to lose this opportunity that you got excited about. I think it's like some
Right.
psychological manipulation that I don't appreciate that aspect of it.
Well, yeah, no, I completely get it. I completely get it.
You know,
So
it would be like,
there's
I
a
mean,
lot.
could you? I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example, an analogy outside the music space. I mean, could you imagine if we did something like that for Nuance, right? Like some guest wants to be on the show, or we have a conversation with a potential guest, and we say, hey, I really like the stuff that you're doing in the community. I would love for you to come on the show. We're going to feature you. We're going to give you this platform. We want you to talk about all the amazing things that you're doing, right? And they respond, oh, great. That's awesome. I look forward to being on the podcast. And then we're like, yeah, totally. I just sent you a PayPal link so you can get the payment going. Like, what payment? What are you talking about? That wasn't even part of this conversation. You know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
That's actually, is that, I guess it's not exactly the same, but right now, Vlad from Vlad TV and Marlon Wayans are in a public feud because I guess he was invited to come on Vlad TV,
Uh,
but he requested a $40,000 payment. Vlad didn't request it. Marlon. I guess it's a little bit different though.
yeah, you do hear that sometimes that
Yeah.
people want to charge you for interviews and stuff like that. And some people
Yeah.
take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, some people used to ask about that. It's usually not so common though.
Yeah.
But now it's the opposite, I guess, where some of the outlets are asking. But most blogs, especially legit ones, I haven't seen them ask for it, especially not the bigger ones. It's usually some of the
Yeah.
hustle type
Right. Right.
ones.
Right. And that's what it is. You feel like you're being hustled. They're trying to hustle you. Right. And listen, I'm a New Yorker. I don't like people trying to take me for a sucker. That's really what it is. If you want to, if your business model is having people pay for exposure or whatever, yeah, do what you do, but be upfront about it. Be
Yeah,
upfront.
you gotta let them know.
Yeah. You don't try to trick people. I don't like
Yeah,
that.
you gotta let them know.
So
So,
all right. Well, we're going to continue with this promotion, and it's not stopping with the blogs and the sites. That was day one. I'm doing the radio stations. I'm going to be hitting up podcasts, right? That I think I might be a good fit on to pitch myself as a guest, and I'm going to be contacting all these different folks. Chat GPT has been helpful in finding outlets, right? Finding options to explore. Of course, you have to fact check it. You've got to do the additional work, but it's good for that first step, right? Even if you want to call it the brainstorming part of it, right? Give me a list of 100 possible places I can hit up. It's a good first starting point, you know.
right, right. So,
So yeah, we will be continuing to work the angles on this. Um, Speaking of working the angles, I guess. Uh,
transitions,
what do you,
transitions.
yeah, what do you think about this spy story that was in City and State? Actually, this relates to a former guest of ours. This guest was on our show a couple times. Uh, Brother Rohan Nareen is quoted in
Mm,
City and State talking about alleged spying coming from the Raj Kumar campaign for state assembly in Manhattan at the time. This was in 2016. But the allegation here is that her campaign would direct people to infiltrate campaigns of opposing candidates and bring information back at the end of the day. Uh, this is something that is against the ethical code. It isn't explicitly a criminal offense.
mm,
There is talk in this article, at least, about maybe it should be, or maybe some kind of penalties should be issued when people do this, because it isn't something that is certainly encouraged, right? As we said, it's actually against the ethical code. In fact, New York has what's called a fair campaign code, which is a list of ethics standards set by the State Board of Elections. This is against the code. If you want to get specific, the code states no person, political party, or committee during the course of any campaign for nomination or election to public office or party position shall directly or indirectly engage in practices of political espionage,
mm.
including but not limited to the theft of campaign materials or assets, placing one's own employee or agent in the campaign organization of another candidate, bribery of members of another campaign staff, electronic or other methods of eavesdropping or wiretapping. So I don't think this has a whole lot of teeth to it, but should it, right? Should we be doing more to discourage spying on political opponents?
Well, I guess what kind of spying? I mean, if you're talking about like, like I think it mentioned like phone tapping or something like that, like yeah, I mean that's clearly illegal. But if you're like say that your political opponent is having a rally and you send someone there to gauge what's going on, like is that the same thing as spying, or is that just
Oh,
doing research, opposition research?
so a couple of things on that. It's funny that you mentioned the wiretap. right? Because I actually read a case a few years ago where a campaign planted a GPS tracker on the opposing candidate's car. And
Mm,
the whole idea was they were going to try to prove that this candidate didn't live where they said that they lived to disqualify them for not meeting their residency requirements for the seat, right?
mm,
And went to court. There was a court case over their residency, whether they properly lived there and they could run for the seat. And of course, they tried introducing as evidence printouts from this GPS tracker showing that the candidate didn't go home at night to that address where they claimed that they lived, right?
mm.
Of course, the other side objected. The candidate's campaign objected, saying that this evidence was obtained illegally, therefore should not be admissible as evidence in the case, right?
Mm.
Judge's response was basically, it may be illegal, but it is interesting. And it was admissible, right? The distinction that was drawn was it wasn't fruit from the poisonous tree, right? That comes in when it's the government doing it. That's a Fourth Amendment violation. We talk about how
Right,
constitutional rights are applied against the government. So if the government were to obtain evidence on you illegally,
right.
specifically via an illegal search or seizure, that would not be admissible in court. That's called fruit from the poisonous tree. This was a private party eavesdropping on another person. Now, sure, planting that GPS tracker is illegal. That's trespass on their property and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
the evidence that they obtained was admissible and used in court. The candidate, by the way, still won the case because it was ruled that it actually didn't matter where they slept at night because they still had an address in district and that was still one of their residences and they were allowed to claim that, even if they never really slept there much. But
Mhm.
they won the case, but for other reasons, right? They tried to keep this evidence out and it was allowed in. And so, yeah, while there are certain things that may not technically be legal, they're still done and they're still used, right? And sometimes you still even see them be brought into court cases. And so spying is something that is commonplace. And again, there really doesn't seem to be a lot of legal force stopping it. The other example that you mentioned was eavesdropping at their rally or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's something that happens all the time. And that's not really spying in the sense that we mean it here, because that's done more openly, right? The person isn't trying to disguise themselves. If they're trying to disguise themselves as your supporter, then it maybe crosses that line. But if they're wearing the other guy's shirt and they show up, are they really spying or are they just attending a public meeting and reporting back what they hear, right? Sometimes they'll even live stream. You see that all the time. We do a rally in the city. People will show up and they'll live stream it. Sometimes people who aren't on your side will do that because they're trying to catch you maybe saying something regrettable or getting you on record, right? Maybe they thought you felt like you were safe. You had your own audience of your own supporters there, but we're gonna show what you're really saying at these events or whatever. So that happens all the time, but that's not really espionage. I wouldn't say, unless you're trying to trick them. Again, it goes back to trickery, right? You're trying to make them believe that you're on their side when really you're on the other side.
Right. Yeah. So I guess that's like the distinction there. Um, yeah, I mean, right now you said it's just a code of ethics. It's not really a law
Right.
on some of these practice. I mean, things like, of course, like phone tapping, that's
Yeah.
illegal.
Yeah.
Um,
Although in New York, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about that case with the GPS tracker. In New York, you have one party consent, right?
right. I think,
Meaning,
yeah, but
right.
that's for recording calls. That wouldn't be like phone tapping though.
Well, no. Well, the act of setting up the phone tap would still be illegal because that's a
Right.
trespass and you're violating their space, right? Maybe even breaking into their house to do it. So now you got that going. So yeah, these are crimes. But the act then of recording the person once that phone tap is set up, well, again, New York is a one-party consent state, and so as
Right.
long as you consent to it, assuming you're in the conversation with them. If they are talking to someone else and you're recording that now you have zero parties consent, right? And
Right.
so that would be illegal in its own right. But if you set up, in theory, you set up a wiretap um, in their house and you're listening in or you're recording conversations through that device that you're having with the person, you're there's nothing illegal about recording those conversations. Again, setting up that device itself is a crime, but
Right.
the act of the recording wouldn't be. But yeah, if you start listening into them having conversations with third parties, then that does become a different crime.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple of states are one party states. I think Virginia
Right.
is also like that.
Yeah, and DC might not be, and things can change. But I remember, I think it was like a Monica Lewinsky show where they were talking about setting up some kind of recording device, and it was saying, you have one party consent, but the punchline of it was the person who was advising that was based in New York, and it was legal in New York to do what she was advising would be legal in New York, but she was like, I'm in DC, there are different laws here, we can't do that here, right?
Hmm.
So I think that was what they were trying to say, that you didn't have that one party consent, probably two party consent in DC.
True, 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 true.
So yeah, all that stuff is interesting. I remember I've had people coming to collect information on my campaign. They didn't hold themselves out as my supporters, right? But these are people who are clearly involved. In fact, it was the chief of staff of the councilman at the time. He would
Mhm.
come, his job, I guess, on the campaign was to come and try to disrupt everything that I did in public. And so if I was going to be at a public event, or if they knew where I was going to be, he would be there. And it almost became a joke. I might have even bought him coffee at one point. Like, I just knew if I went somewhere, my friend would be shadowing me, right? That was what his job was for the other campaign. And he would try to get right up in my face too. If I was talking to someone on the street, or again, this is a space where he knows I'm going to be, might be outside an event or whatever. He wouldn't let me have those conversations one on one. He would stand as close as he could to get in on them and eavesdrop everything that I said. And I think part of that, aside from collecting information, is just trying to throw me off balance, annoy me, right? Maybe he was hoping I was going to push him or swing at him or something like that, right? And then they could use that against
Provoke
me.
you.
Right. He's trying to provoke me. He's trying to instigate.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is commonplace, right? That's a little bit different from this, although some might say that shouldn't be allowed either. At a certain point, though, you do have to take into account people's First Amendment rights, people's rights to be out in public. This is a campaign, so it's one
Right.
thing to break into someone's house, or their office or something like that. That's different from tracking them in public or at a public event and listening to what they're saying in public.
Right. Yeah, I think that's going to be a distinction there, right? If you're in the public, you're probably going to have to just realize that that could be a possibility, that someone's going to be listening in, or, and not have certain conversations, strategy conversations, et cetera, in public like that.
Right, right. It's probably good practice regardless, right? Just assume
Right.
that they're spies. You don't want to be paranoid, though, right? They say it's even,
Spies everywhere.
yeah, you can get very paranoid in politics. So you don't want to get that crazy where you just assume everyone is out to get you. But you do kind of have to be cautious, right? Um, some people will say, what do you have to be cautious about if you're not doing anything wrong? But it's not
That's not the
about
point.
doing something wrong or not. It's about them using information against you, proprietary, or stuff that you want to be proprietary against you, right? We're talking about strategies here. For example,
Right.
someone maybe invites you to a meeting, or let's say it's a small little get together, a barbecue, right? It could be anything. You're at a public event. One of your supporters was like, hey, Mike, a group of us are having a barbecue or a little get together, tomorrow at this place. Do you want to come and speak to us? Do you want to come? It'd be a great opportunity for you to campaign to them. Well, now if the other campaign has spies around there, they know where you're going to be tomorrow, and they could try to disrupt that, right? They can try to ruin the event somehow, distract the people there, also show up, talk trash about you to those people you're going to go campaign in front of. So, do you want to subject yourself to that if you can avoid it? I mean, is that a matter of, well, if you aren't doing anything wrong, what is that to worry about? Is that a matter of doing something wrong, or is that just a matter of wanting to strategize without disruption?
Right. Um, and I don't like that excuse. And it's used in a lot of different other places as well. It's like it's not the point as far as, if you're not doing anything wrong, don't worry about people listening. Like there's
Yeah,
still privacy. Like it's still a thing. That's, people are, interested in having privacy.
right.
So,
And then some would say maybe when it comes to a campaign, there should be no privacy because you're running for public office. And so everything that you do should be the subject of public scrutiny, right? And so I don't know. I mean, it's a point of view some people have, right? Like if a group again were to invite you to a barbecue, should you ever have that space to yourself, or should that be posted to the world's website for everyone to be able to see and take advantage of it?
right. Yeah.
But
So,
you do know that people will try to sabotage, right? It shouldn't really come as
ooh,
a big surprise, right? It could be, even like overhearing your meeting with a union leader or some other elected official or something like that, right? But what will they
right.
do? They'll try to get to that person first. They'll try to talk trash about you to them or try to paint you in a negative light so that when you meet with them, they don't like you anymore. I mean, people will do that kind of thing,
Right.
or, if you're seeking some group's endorsement, maybe tomorrow you're going to meet with some group and you can have an endorsement interview. Well, maybe another campaign wasn't aware of that or wasn't on the schedule. Maybe they were on the schedule, but for next week. But they hear that you're doing it before they are. So now what are they going to do? Maybe they're going to call the group and try to reschedule their interview, or they can try to do something to get in the way of you having that opportunity. You know.
Right.
So I think that's something to be mindful of. But again, if we're talking about now, what is the legal enforcement, or do we want certain things to be illegal? I think we do have to draw a distinction between: are you tricking somebody? Are you trying to disguise yourself as someone's friend only to be their enemy? Or are you just publicly gathering information the way any prudent campaign would?
Right.
So, what do you think? Do you think that there should be legal enforcement on this? To the extent that it's against the code of ethics?
I think I don't know about legal enforcement. I think the legal enforcement would be difficult. The legal parts that they could be violating are already illegal. You know what I mean? Like I said, the phone tapping or, that type of thing.
Right. But what about this idea of putting, for example, one of your campaign workers on another campaign for the purpose of gathering information to use against them?
Yeah, that hmm, can you, I guess you'd have to find a way to prove that that was the case. Like it'd be easy to say that that's not the case,
That you mean that
you
you weren't
know.
doing that?
Yeah, I mean they could say, "Oh no, support I support the candidate. That's why I'm here." I mean
I mean,
that's
what if you can show that they're working on both campaigns at the same time?
I don't know. I really love the political process.
I like both. I like both of them. I mean,
I'm
look, that,
just
that's a
I'm just
that's a
I'm just
question.
so I'm just so interested in having everyone the people
Yeah,
come out and vote and participate. So I'm working on both campaigns so that I can help just encourage voting in my community.
that's a question of evidence. You would have to try to prove it, and there
Yeah, yeah,
testimony and people. I mean, people from the campaign could testify to that. You could try to have maybe text messages or whatever proof that you have showing that you were asked to do this. In this particular case, that's what they're alleging. They're saying that the campaign directed people who were there on their behalf. Now, I think they were mostly interns or unpaid workers, right? Volunteers, essentially. But
right,
they were told to join a rival's campaign and collect information about their practices, whatever they were doing, and bring it back, report back at the end of the night, showing
hmm
what was going on. And in fact, I think they said, let me see in the article, there was a mention of a blurry campaign schedule that was reported, that was produced allegedly. Yeah, so our friend Rohan said he remembered one campaign worker sending blurry photos from inside the campaign office of a rival. But okay, so it wasn't a schedule, I guess. It was it was blurry photos from inside the office.
It sounds very like that type of stuff sounds very much like what we would consider corporate espionage.
Corporate.
You know what I mean? Like if you go into another company and you take blurry photos of some of their strategy or some of their stuff, like I think that's very much illegal. to do.
But again, is there a difference between a private company and a political candidate? Whereas, because some people think that we should have more transparency and it all should be out in the open, right? There should be sunshine on everything that politicians do. Um, it does harken back to Watergate, right? Obviously, people got in trouble for that. Nixon lost the presidency over it. So
Right.
obviously, it isn't a free for all here. Here's a quote from Rohan, who served as the deputy campaign manager for the particular campaign. He said, "We actually recruited volunteers who would be, this is the word she used, meaning Raj Kumar, they would be spies that would be sent to volunteer for other assembly campaigns. And then they would be snapping pictures of their daily schedules in their respective candidates' offices. They
Mm,
would have to report back to us at like 9 or 10 p.m. after they volunteered for the competitors' campaigns." And
mm,
apparently, multiple people who were asked to do this confirmed that that was the case. The campaign was asking them to do that. Somebody said, basically, what the hell? We're already working for you for free. Now you want us to work for two campaigns for free. Because again, you got
mm.
to go there and to pose as a volunteer for their campaign. That means you're probably going to be doing some things for them too to try to build up some goodwill, right? So that they like you and they trust you and they give you information.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So is that something that really should be encouraged? And should we say, hey, what the hell? We should have access to every candidate's schedule. They shouldn't have that.
No, I don't think so. I
You
think,
don't think so, right?
no, I mean, people, just because they don't want all that out there doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong. I mean, they might have a strategy. Maybe they want to unveil a certain initiative, like in a certain way, that has
Right.
maximum, that gives them maximum impact.
Yeah.
All
Absolutely.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. But I think that there are some people out there who just believe that this all should be wide open and transparent. And listen, you want to come out with some initiative, we should have a right to know about it. And if another campaign wants to beat you to the punch, they should be allowed to do that. And I feel like there are some people who have that mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
But
But
yeah, I agree. I agree. And I don't think we want to live in a world where it's just expected that people are going to either spy or demand that access or always have that access. I mean, I don't
well,
think
we
that's
are. We're in that world. We're in that world. There's, there's no around it. I think the best that we can do is determine how we're going to navigate that world.
well, what I mean is,
I mean, think
your
about it. Everywhere
campaign.
you go, you're on camera pretty
True.
much
No, you're right.
everywhere.
You're right.
Everyone's got a
I think
listening
that's
device and a
probably
video
why
device.
a lot of people think that there should be no privacy because they're just so used to this world that we don't really have any in the first place. But if you're a campaign, I do believe that you should be able to strategize amongst yourself as a campaign without that being broadcast or delivered
Sure,
to
absolutely.
opposing
Absolutely.
campaigns. And I don't think it's a healthy environment that we would have if the norm was that's something that we're all just going to do and we're going to allow it, right? I mean, we do have, for example, an ethics code against it. So if we had maybe criminal laws to prosecute people for doing it, maybe that would discourage or disincentivize that behavior even further, right? But I do believe that we should be able to have some autonomy in that. I mean, because do you really want to create a culture where politicians are even more paranoid? You know what I mean? Like, I think there should be some baseline level of you can act like a normal person and make a plan without that plan being on the front page of the New York Times.
Right. Absolutely. No, I agree.
Um, yeah, all right. So I guess we want to ask the people about do they believe this stuff should be illegal?
Right.
So the poll question of the week is: should spying on opposing political campaigns be subject to criminal prosecution?
Yeah, see what people have to say in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what do you think about? I guess this is nuance, so we start teasing out the gray areas and things like that. But what if it isn't so devious per se? What if you aren't holding yourself out as someone who wants to work for the other campaign necessarily, but let's say the other campaign is having a meet and greet or
Right.
grand opening of our office. Come to our campaign and we're going to discuss our plans for the campaign, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it ethical, do you think, to send someone who's your supporter to this public event that they advertised to hear about their strategy and then report that back to the campaign.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if it's a public event and they're broadcasting it to the public in that event, then they should have that understanding that anyone could hear this and it could go out. And I think in many ways that might even be, it might even be part of the strategy. I don't think a smart campaign is going to put out their strategies that they don't want people to know. They're not going to put that out to the public, right?
True, true. But see, the thing is, this is why I guess to be a gray area. The question is, to what extent do they believe that they're really talking to the public, right? Because I've seen scenarios like this play out where a campaign will say, we're holding our kickoff, our launch event, launch party, or whatever, right? So they're kind of expecting the people that come to be supporters of theirs. Now, if they're smart, they're going to realize that they're advertising this to the public, and so there could be people who are against them who show up and
Yeah,
may not say that, right? They can just kind of wander in, just kind of like stand watching and then report back to someone else. Maybe they're just instigators. Maybe they're not even part of another campaign officially, but they're just trying to cause trouble or they're just trying to get some props from someone else. So they just run to someone else. Guess what I heard in there, right?
right.
Yeah, that's probably going to happen, or you should think that that could happen. But
Or there could be media there that is going to report on what you've said, and if
true,
it's something you don't want heard, you shouldn't say it in a
right,
public
right.
broadcast.
But what if there's no media? Because I'm thinking back to my experiences in these kinds of rooms. Oftentimes, it's a small group of people, so it's not like this huge party or event with 100 people and cameras and balloons and everyone talking on the mic. It could be like in some small little office. Maybe it was an H&R Block that they converted into a campaign office for the next month, and they're inviting people to come and I don't know, 5 or 6 people show up. And so it's a very informal conversation with these people about, hey, thank you for coming to the campaign. All right, this is what we're planning to do. Next week, we can start knocking on doors, whatever. They're not really expecting these people to not be supporters in that intimate of a setting. But I think,
Yeah,
again, if you're being smart, you should allow for the possibility that someone there might not be a supporter.
yeah, I think that would be a failure on their part.
Yeah. But it happens all the time. It happens all the
Yeah,
time. They'll go, because here's the other thing, you can't be too secretive because you have to let people know what you're doing and what you want them to do, right?
yeah, but you got to be
And
strategic about what you're letting
yeah,
out. Sure.
yeah, yeah. But if the campaign is planning to knock on doors next week and you're trying to recruit people to start shifts to knock on doors, you can't be like, at some point we'll be knocking on doors. When? Well, you can't tell you. Well, then you're not going to get any volunteers, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, it's something like that. I don't think it's something you're hiding, right?
Right.
Because every campaign is going to knock on doors.
Well,
You
but
know,
again,
and you might want to say,
the
we're
strategy
going to
of
be
it,
knocking on doors in these
yeah,
areas,
right.
or this is you would say that, but you might not say how you're going to do it, how you're planning to do it, how you're going to maximize your plan or anything like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
But the
I think
strategy also is, when do you start certain aspects of the campaign? When do you start your field program? When do you start doing mail? You know what I mean? These are things that are going to get out potentially. It's hard to really keep them too secretive, especially if you're trying to recruit other people from the public to help you with
right,
these tasks, right? But
right.
that's the balance I guess you have to find, because if you are putting it out to the public that you're going to do it, at a certain point you have to, I guess, expect that that information could be used against you.
Yeah, yeah. And that should figure into your strategy on how you disseminate your information to the public.
Right, right.
So I think, yeah, some of that has to fall on the campaign, knowing, what to say, what not to say.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess again, getting back to the early conversation, it's a matter of striking the right balance, right?
Right.
Certain things maybe you want to keep close to the vest. Certain things you can have to let people know,
Absolutely.
decide when to let them know and how to let them know and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
no, I mean it's just one of those things, right? I hear from even people who hire campaign workers. They'll say, "Do you know this person? Can you trust this person? Or are they just trying to spy?" You know, they start looking into the person's background. They'll say, for example, they have campaign experience. You want to know which campaigns did you work on before? Because let's just say, for example, this is a Democratic campaign, but your worker who comes in the door has 25 years of experience working exclusively on Republican campaigns, that might be a red flag. It could be that they switched or they just like you as a candidate, but there might be reason to kind of scrutinize that a little bit more and say, well, who are you connected to again? Why are you really here? What is the deal here? Right? Because there are certain things that might be suspicious, and maybe that's part of the takeaway here too. Vet people, especially if you're going to be giving them information, right? Vet them on their background, and it's never going to be perfect. In fact, here in this article, they reached out to two of the other campaigns that were being spied on allegedly, and they both said they weren't aware that there were any spies in the campaign. Now,
Right.
that could be to save face. I don't know. Maybe they don't want to admit it, right? Or maybe they did a good job hiding it, or maybe the spies didn't do a great job in spying. I mean, either they did a very good job and they were just so undercover that they weren't detected, or maybe they just didn't really do much spying at all, but they were told to spy. I don't know where on the spectrum that would fall, but they don't always know that it's happening. When it does happen. Um, I think it's something that people should, again, find the balance. So look out for, but you don't want to be overly paranoid either, right? Because then it's like you're just turning people away who are coming through the door. We had that issue, I think, in 2012 when we were first starting out. Certain people, we were like, why are they here? Like if they just appeared in front of us,
Yeah,
off
yeah,
the
yeah.
wall, we'd be like, why are they here? Who sent you? Basically, right? And
Yeah.
then
Who
I'm
are
thinking,
you?
yeah, like what is your deal? Why all of a sudden do you want to be on the inside of the campaign? Are you just trying to get information? What are you going to do with this?
Right,
And
right, right.
it's again, it's I guess it's finding the balance. You don't want to cripple yourself into not trusting anyone or not giving any tasks to anyone else because now you're really handicapping yourself. Right now, you're letting that paranoia.
Sounds like you're working out some it sounds like you're working out some of your own feelings on this year. Like you've definitely been uh I'd say maybe violated in this way and you're like trying to figure out like how do I navigate this space
Well,
and not be paranoid about it.
yeah, I don't know if I was really violated in that way as much as I'm cognizant of it because I'm
Right.
in politics and I work on campaigns and I'm an election lawyer. So it's not even about my own campaigns all the time. It's other campaigns that I'm working on or with
Right.
the candidates. And I think it's a constant question of how do you navigate that reality. And what I've always said is most people aren't really as devious as portrayed in the movies, right? Like you'll be watching a movie and inevitably somebody will try to befriend someone for the express purpose of stabbing them in the back later, right?
Right.
Usually in the real world, I find it isn't quite that dramatic. Usually it's a bit of a gray area, or the truth is somewhere in between, right? Like you're thinking that they're a spy, they're out to get you, they're out to destroy you, they're telling you that they love you and they just want to help you. Usually it's somewhere in the middle of that, but usually they don't have nefarious motives. I mean, it does happen. I'm not saying it never happens. We see this article, we hear these stories. Yeah, it does happen. But usually, what I find is that if someone is coming to you and they say that they want to help you, they usually do
Hmm.
have some interest in helping you. It doesn't mean that they can be trusted entirely, though, because sometimes what ends up happening is they do want to gain points with other people by letting them know what they learned from you. So they might not be doing it with the express purpose of screwing you over, but if they're in an opportunity where let's say they're in some other room somewhere and there's a conversation about I wish I knew where Mike was going tomorrow. Oh, I know where he's going tomorrow. Like it wasn't like she woke up or he woke up with the plan of revealing that, but it was an opportunity that presented itself and opportunists will use opportunities to try to gain points for themselves, disregarding the negative consequences on you, right? So there's a bit of a distinction there. We can argue or talk about how meaningful the distinction is, but I think there are a lot of people who will be quick to bring you negative consequences, but it doesn't mean that that was necessarily their intention to do it. Their intention was really to get points for themselves, and they don't
Right.
care if it hurts anyone else.
Right. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so I say that I guess I've landed on this area of don't be too paranoid. Don't think that everyone is out to get you. Most people are pretty genuine with their intentions, but it doesn't mean that they'll all be trustworthy in the end.
Absolutely.
So
And that almost sounds like a bottom line
yeah.
too.
So be cautious, right?
Right.
Be cautious in spite of the fact that you don't want to be too paranoid. It's again, everything in life has a balance.
Absolutely.
So all right, well, I guess we should move on to the main event here, the topic that we wanted to get into, which was absentee voting in New York. Today, the Court of Appeals ruled that the New York law is constitutional. Now, this law was passed by the legislature, allowing for no excuse absentee voting during the early voting period of an election, right? So the law in New York prior so now, right, all along, all for many years was if you wanted to vote absentee, you had to have an excuse. You had to either be sick on election day or know you were going to be absent from the state on election day. Well,
Hmm.
there was a proposed constitutional amendment in New York that the voters actually rejected. After that point, the legislature passed a law anyway, saying that you can vote absentee with no excuse. This started in COVID, right? Because in when COVID happened, we were trying to prevent people from congregating in public, and so
Right.
it was encouraged to go to absentee voting. And for that year in 2020, you didn't need to provide an excuse, right? And there was a provision that was passed that allowed COVID-19 basically to be the excuse. So it started with that, and people would say brand new world, right? The new normal. It kind of became the
Yeah.
standard coming out of the pandemic. People got used to voting that way, and we saw a lot more people, in fact, vote that way than who used to vote. For a lot of people, it was a major inconvenience for them to get to the polls in person, right? And so this was a way to just make it easier for them to vote. Well, a law was passed in New York now, making that permanent, where going forward, you won't need any excuse. You can just vote absentee during the early voting period. It was challenged in court by the Republicans. Why? Well, we hear people really coming from Trump, right? But people from the Republican Party like to tie this notion of absentee voting to alleged voter fraud.
Fraud.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
with
there's no evidence of it.
no evidence of that whatsoever. They're trying to somehow make you think that that's fraud. And I'll say this,
And on top of that,
yeah.
Trump does vote early.
Well, right, but there's also a difference now between early voting and absentee voting,
Right, right, right.
and early absentee voting. So we'll talk about those distinctions in a second, but I'll say that the Republicans have won, I think, the narrative on how absentee voting is categorized, because I remember hearing that that was a Republican talking point. The whole idea of mail-in votes. They kept saying that the election will be stolen with mail-in votes, right? Mail-in votes, and it became like this demonic thing. Like they demonized the
Right,
phrase mail-in votes, and it got to the point where that was a talking point. Just saying mail-in votes was scaring people, and kind of feeding into that narrative. And so Democrats were told, don't even use the term mail-in votes. Call them absentee votes, not called mail-in votes, because it was like every time that the Republicans would say it, they had so much disdain and disgust, and they used scare tactics that the phrase mail-in vote got scary, and it got to be like a
right,
very weighed negative term. So no, it's not mail-in votes; they're absentee votes. Well, they seem to have won that battle because now that's just what it's being called. It's being called a mail-in vote. I mean, I'm looking at this article here from Times Union, not a right-wing paper. So my best knowledge here. This is just reporting on the story about the court case from the Court of Appeals. And the headline: Top court rules NY's early mail-in voting is constitutional. Mail-in voting.
right,
So we seem to have moved away from calling it absentee voting. So,
right,
maybe where the Republicans are better at messaging, I think they won that battle. They wanted that to be
right,
called mail-in votes. We would say, no, 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 they're absentee votes. Now I guess they're mail-in votes. And we know a lot of people don't like that term.
right. Yeah. And they're generally pretty good at that.
Right?
Um,
Yeah.
it's backfired a few times, not backfired, but it hasn't worked a few times. But in general, they seem to be able to control the narrative in that way. They
Right.
tried to do it with with the Affordable Care Act, calling
Obamacare.
it Obamacare, and Obama was like, "Hey, I'm all for it. Let's do it. It's
Eventually,
Obamacare."
yeah. Eventually, right?
Eventually,
Yeah,
eventually. But
that didn't
now
happen.
it's
I think people forget that didn't happen right away. There
no,
was
no, no,
a
no.
time when that was used as a derogatory term, and
Right.
even
And
for
they
Obama,
meant it that way.
yeah, right. That's how it was taken. Obama was like, yeah, Obamacare. He was like, no, stop calling it that, damn it. Right. Eventually, I think they advised him just to try to flip
Right.
the script on it. But there was that time where
Yeah.
again, winning that narrative battle, and they made it a dirty word. So
Right. Yeah. And it's the same thing. They do that a lot. Um, entitlements, for example.
yeah,
Calling Social Security, for example, an entitlement. Well,
right.
it is an entitlement because you are entitled to that money because you pay into it over the years, but they've turned it into a dirty word to make it sound like you're getting free money for nothing.
Well, right, because they're playing with the word entitled. They want people to think, oh,
Right.
look at this entitled brat over here. He's so entitled.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
And they
they
also do that with Democrat Party. That was done as say Democrat Party, don't say Democratic Party. That was done to make people think of rats. That's why they came up with that.
right.
Focus on the Democrat, but they focus on the RAT at the end. So yeah, all these things are done intentionally, and you're right, they do tend to be better at that. At least certain masterminds, I guess, up there pulling the
Or
string.
at least willing.
Yeah,
Either they're better at it or they're the ones that are more willing to do that.
yeah, yeah. It's
I
true.
can't think of I'm trying to off the top here think of a time when either Democrats or the liberals or whatever tried to play that sort of association game to change the narrative in a negative
Problem
way.
the problem is that Republicans don't often propose policy. They tend to react in a negative way to
Right.
policy that Democrats propose, right?
So maybe their position is just more of a natural fit
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
coming with that type of narrative.
Yeah, because they're trying to scare you into voting for them, right? Their message is
Right. Right.
often if you vote for the Democrat, the country will burn down. And so you can't do that. You know,
Right.
they don't usually lead from a place of optimism and hope and love. It's usually we're going to hell in a handbasket if they get in, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
So the closest example I can think of off the top of my head, if you want to look at it from the other side, I don't know, tax cuts for the wealthy, but that's not really playing a word game. Republicans
No,
will call it tax cuts, but they really mean for the wealthy. They're just not saying that part.
right. I
Yeah.
can't think of that'd be something interesting to think about, like
Has there
a
been an
time,
example?
right, on the other side where they've done that same type of thing.
Reaganomics, maybe?
But that was true though. I guess they were
But that's
I guess
subjective.
they I guess they were trying to associate those bad policies with Reagan specifically. So I guess
Yeah.
that would be the closest.
But I'm just thinking in terms of like an Obamacare equivalent, because didn't Reagan, I don't know if it was before or after, but didn't Reagan embrace the term also?
I don't know. I don't know. I
Or how about
don't
just
know.
trickle down economics? Democrats have demonized that, but that's more a critique on the policy.
Right.
Yeah. The
So
problem is that to find a true equivalent, you really have to find not just a critique on the policy, but scare tactics that are used to try to make people
right.
afraid of the word. And that's not something Democrats really do.
Reaganomics might be the closest that matches it just off of this quick
Yeah.
brainstorm of
Yeah.
it. That might be the closest because when Democrats start talking about Republican policies, they often do bring up Reaganomics and trickle down theory and in that, that negative light. Now, you, I, people will debate on whether it's true or
Right.
not. I think it is, but the fact is the way that they use it is in that kind of similar
Yeah.
vein. So
But
that might be the
here's one
closest.
that might maybe is more on point. They don't say gay bill in Florida because the bill didn't actually say you can't say gay, but Democrats did a really good job at making people believe that or talking as if that's what the bill had said.
Yeah, that would probably work in there.
Yeah.
That's probably a
Right.
more recent example.
Right. So
Yeah.
we'll think about that. If anyone can think of any examples as to when Democrats have taken language that originated with Republicans. I guess it doesn't even have to be originated with Republicans because with the mail-in votes, that's just something that they made up. Republicans just made up, right? So have Democrats made up a term? I guess would be the more appropriate question. Have they made up a term to try to
Yeah.
scare people about Republican policy?
Right.
Don't say gay. I think kind of fits that bill.
That's probably the closest for
Yeah,
the in the
yeah,
recent era that
yeah.
I could. Yeah, that's an
So,
interesting thought experiment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, is there something about the abortion issue that fits that category? Maybe.
I was trying
Yeah,
to think that as well.
yeah.
But it's more critique
Right,
than like a demonizing slogan.
right, right, right.
You know what I
That
mean?
does naturally fit the character of the right more. But it's funny
Yeah.
that you brought up the word liberal before. Back in 2012, people were still calling themselves liberals before
Right.
progressive really came into fashion. But the reason why people moved away from liberal and started embracing progressive is because the right did such a good job, such an effective job demonizing the word liberal. And that used to be a
Right.
thing. Oh, these dirty liberals. And they were like, well, we're progressive because that became such a dirty word. And now they're doing with the word progressive to the point I think people might start going back to liberal.
Yeah, their side does a lot in that way. I mean, the term woke, for example,
Right.
they've done that big time with that word.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting to think about the
Yeah.
opposite
Yeah.
way.
So,
And we've asked questions like this before, and I can't think of it right now, but if there's a specific propaganda that the left does that's similar to the right, and we couldn't really come up with anything. And maybe it's just the inherent part of the positions,
yeah.
the way that they go about it. It's just more natural to do it in that way than it fits the other way. It was
Right.
propaganda, right? It was like I think it was propaganda. I have to look it up. But yeah, there was another one question that we asked that was similar to this that kind of tried to see if there's a distinction in this way.
Right. Right. Yeah. We had said that people on the right maybe were more inclined to go about it that way, just based on the makeup, I guess, of what makes someone even want to hold that position in the first place. It just seems to kind of go hand in hand with that.
Right. I think it was what is the, we can pinpoint propaganda from the right. But here it is. I've actually found it.
Okay.
Um, it was a post that we put up. The word propaganda is thrown around a lot. Conservative propaganda is easy to identify. Climate change is a myth. Trickle-down economics benefits the poor. Most welfare recipients are on drugs, etc. Can anyone provide legitimate liberal propaganda? And we were having a hard
Well,
time pinpointing that.
yeah, these might not be one to one.
Nowadays, I think we might be able to do that more.
Yeah, yeah. I was just thinking of anti-vax, right?
Right,
Sometimes when someone even questions a vaccine, doesn't come out against it necessarily, but has any kind of hesitation about it, they get labeled by the left as an anti-vax psychopath or something like that, conspiracy theorist, and so forth. So that does
mm,
happen. They'll say things like, "You don't believe in the science," even though there isn't any settled science really on most things, right? Especially things that are new are called into question oftentimes. And again, it isn't necessarily a matter of saying you're against something, but even just being intellectually curious about something could get labeled
right,
as an extremist, right? So
right.
that does happen.
That's You know what? That's actually interesting because I think when we asked that back then,
Mm-hmm.
and this was 2018, we asked that back then, there really wasn't a lot of answers in that regard. And I'm looking, one of the posts I put up, there was like, 40, 50 responses, and no one was really able to pinpoint liberal propaganda in that way. But asking it right now, you were
Yeah,
able to pick up some right away.
right.
It's like something changed
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that's a product of the increased polarization of it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, hey, maybe these are interesting topics for the university professor who wants to bring nuance to college.
Right, right, right.
So, all right, wrapping up this discussion on this particular court case, I wanted to just bring up that the Republicans who sued to challenge the law were saying that the state constitution only allowed either in-person voting on election day, I guess, or if you're going to do absentee voting, it has to have an excuse. There's no excuse absentee voting anytime during the early voting period. They said that that wasn't constitutional, and they used some arguments which weren't persuasive. I mean, a lot of it depends on what the definition or the interpretation of the word at was, because it was something about at the polling place, and it was saying, it's got to be at the polling place, can't be by mail, that kind of stuff. But anyway, all of the history was looked at, the constitutional provisions, statutes, and the court ultimately decided that there is a strong presumption on the side of letting people vote. Voting is a fundamental right. And when analyzing these statutes and these laws, you have to kind of default to the position that people should be allowed to vote. And if your argument is you think that the right should be restricted, you kind of come into it a loser, right? Not saying that you can't win such a case, but the court is going to default to the position that the side arguing for better voting rights is probably favored here, because voting is such a fundamental part of our system in our country.
Right. Yeah.
So ultimately, the law was found to be constitutional, meaning going forward, you will be able to vote absentee in New York without an excuse.
I think you should be able to. I mean, we want to get as many people voting as possible and making it easier as long as we can ensure the integrity of the voting. I think it's something we should all be for.
Yes, I agree. And for anyone who wants to restrict the right to vote, anyone who engages in,
Uh-oh, I see it. It's coming.
see it, right? You see it.
I
Anyone,
see it.
yeah, yeah. Anyone who wants to engage in voter suppression, you get the rubber chicken of the week.
Yeah. Rubber chicken of the week. Yes.
That's
I'm
right.
so sad that the chicken doesn't have like a squeak noise. Like
Maybe we'll upgrade to a more advanced
yeah.
chicken.
So, all
Yes.
right.
And so,
We did have a poll from last week
oh
as
yeah, we
well.
did. We did. I forgot about that. All right. Speaking of democracy, right?
Right, right. Last week we were talking about breakdancing in the Olympics, and we asked, should breakdancing be included as a sport in future Olympic Games? We're not talking about, the controversy or any of that, just in general here. And we got a good number of votes here. People had shared their opinion here. And it's 26% said yes, 74% said no,
Hmm.
that it should not be.
Okay,
So
so the majority
interesting.
think it should be a sport in the Olympics.
Majority says it shouldn't be.
It should. I think you said yes. What was the question? Should it not be a sport? You asked
Should
in the negative.
should breakdancing be included as a sport in
Right.
future Olympic Games?
People said
26
yes.
said yes, it should be.
Uh,
74% said no, it shouldn't be.
oh, they said no, it shouldn't be. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were they blaming Ray Gun for this, or they just thought that it shouldn't be a sport? Period.
I didn't see a lot of yeah, not in regards to blaming ray gun. Let's see, one person was saying, absolutely. Um, saying watch 1 minute of the competition and try and tell me that these aren't elite athletes. Some people mentioned they have ice dancing at the Winter Olympics, and then of course there's the gymnastic floor exercises, which is basically dance and tumbling with music. So they're saying why not? Synchronized swimming, same type of thing. Figure skating, all of these are kinds of dance and rhythmic movements, and they're staples in the Olympics. Um, I think, let's see, there was a lot of supporters saying that, commenting. I'm trying to find some negative ones.
So most people voting shouldn't be a sport without comment.
It looks like it. Yeah. A lot of a lot of people in the comments are supporting it. Yeah, I don't see any negative things. here. I mean, there were a couple of people that I see one comment about ray gun, but yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Some nasty comments on my TikTok about her. I don't know if you saw that.
oh, really?
Like, really, yeah, seemed very upset by her.
Yeah, that I've had people trying to get me to comment on it. But I tried to steer clear of it. They can come to the to last week's podcast. We did like 45 minutes talking
Yeah,
about it.
I saw the clip.
So, I see someone commented here, the problem isn't with breakdancing. They're saying no dancing should be an event in the Olympics. Uh, they used to have ballroom dancing. They don't anymore. He's, what is it? The Olympics just isn't a place for dancing. And they're like, what's next? Cheerleading,
That is funny. The Olympics just isn't a place for dancing. It sounds like get off my lawn.
right?
No
But
fun allowed.
at the
But they
same
do
time,
have dancing, don't they?
they do the gymnastics floor exercises. That's dancing. All they do, they do two or three, what maybe more than three or four tumbling passes, and in between they're dancing. That's part of their routine.
What about figure skating? Isn't that dancing?
Figure skating is dancing. They're all doing their dancing there. Like there's a bunch of sports that are staples
Right.
in the Olympics or events instead of sports, because that's another question. But there's a bunch of events that are staples that are dance based.
I have to read these comments here on my TikTok because I actually got a laugh out of, especially the second one. Two comments here from this lady. I was asking if the Ray Gun Olympics fiasco was a bad look for hip hop, right?
Mhm.
This comment says, "It is not a bad look for hip hop. It's typical white woman Karen behavior. She cheated to get to the Olympics, and blaming hip hop for a trash ass cheater is ridiculous." And then I said, "Do you think it represents hip hop in a positive light to the world?" And the second comment here says, "I think hip hop is being used as a talking point to deflect from this awful heifer who doesn't belong. This awful heifer. This awful heifer. She was lazy, disrespectful, and lacks creativity. This genre is the epitome of hip hop." But that was my point. You know that breakdancing is part of hip hop. And so if
Right.
it's being presented in an embarrassing way on the Olympic stage,
Right.
does that not make hip hop look bad to the world?
Right. But here's a quote from one of Ray Gun's papers that I took exception to. And she was saying that her and her the person that she co-wrote the paper with, they like to call what they do um or he calls what he does street dancing, and she calls what she does breaking and not hip hop, because she doesn't want to say that or try to say in any way that she's representing hip hop. But see, here's the point: is breaking is hip hop.
It's
It's one of
breakdancing.
the core foundations of
This
hip
should
hop.
be, yeah. We could do a skit on this, right? Like have somebody rapping. I'm rapping, but I don't want to be like I'm not the hip hop guy. Now have them spraying a wall
It's
of graffiti. I ain't doing hip hop. DJ, oh, don't call me hip hop. Like this is hip hop.
right.
Yeah,
And who are you to take one of the core elements out of it and say, well, I'm doing
right,
this and this is
right.
not what that is.
You know what? We just found it. We were looking for answers and we found them. Propaganda from the left. Here you go.
So yeah, it's again, it's a deep thing. We can get
Yeah,
into it.
yeah.
Back onto the poll though, one person, the last comment I see here, they're saying yes, breaking should be included, and so should pole dancing. Both are complex acrobatic disciplines requiring skill, conditioning, and talent. By comparison with some other events that are included, like ribbon dancing, for example, they are both fully worthy of inclusion.
No dancing at the Olympics.
Yeah, I forgot ribbon dancing is an Olympic event. So
I wonder if
I've never
that commenter who
pole
said no
dancing
dancing,
though.
that
Huh?
that commenter, I wonder if the one who said that there should be no dancing at the Olympics would also want to ban people who do celebratory dances when they win. I just see him in a crowd. There should be no dancing at the Olympics.
Right? Violation.
Face. Yeah, posture, posture. Come on. The world's
Yeah,
watching.
isn't
Yeah,
isn't there that you can get like a violation for excessive celebration in
right.
NFL, right?
I was just gonna say that they probably want to ban end zone dancing too.
Right.
You know,
So
big sport, end zone dancing.
I'm surprised, I'm kind of surprised there's no American football in the Olympics. No
Football
one's tried.
dancing?
But
Just
I guess it's mainly the US that
right,
plays that sport and not the
right,
rest of the world. So that makes sense,
right.
I guess.
Yeah, yeah. They would say that's not called football at all. It's called hand egg. Is what they call it, hand egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hey, it's been a good discussion as always.
yes, definitely has been. And so I think we kind of had the bottom line earlier, but do you want to
I feel
reiterate the
like
bottom line?
the bottom line is it has to be all about balance, right?
Yeah,
Because that kind of was the common thread tonight. You don't want to give into being extreme about things unnecessarily, right? I mean, for example, we talked about, do you allow yourself to be paranoid, or do you have a, or do you just trust everyone without having any skepticism? There's I think a line to be drawn somewhere in the middle.
right.
I think we were talking about, this propaganda. Propaganda is bad, no matter where it comes from. You know,
Sure.
playing these word games, trying to be intellectually dishonest. That's not something that should be tolerated from anyone. But we do see it coming from the extremes, right? And so I think we call the show Nuance for a reason. I think the truth usually lies somewhere in that nuance. And it is really all about finding the appropriate balance.
I completely agree. Definitely
You know?
makes sense.
But that doesn't mean, some people will try to play word games with that, right? And they'll say, oh, well, that
Sure.
means that you're a moderate on, and it means that you're in the middle on every issue, and you don't really stand for anything because you don't really believe in anything. And it's like, no, like we're not saying that you go down the line on every issue when you say, what is the left position? What is the right position? Let's average them out and come to the middle. Like that's not what we're saying, right?
Right.
We're saying again, it's about balance and not allowing yourself to be taken over by extreme forces, especially when they're often irrational.
Sounds good to me. And they can find us on YouTube at Nuance Show, as well as everywhere podcasts are available. And every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern here on we're on Facebook as well. So
Yes,
we
sound.
out here. We out here.
Yeah, as always, we've got work to do. Don't forget, Bring Rockets back, hit streaming on Friday. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.